Thank you very much for inviting me here at the Agile Adria conference. This is my third visit to Croatia. Awesome. The first one was in Zadar, or Zadar. How do I pronounce it correctly? Zadar. Okay. So at the CROZ conference, also at a luxurious spa. For some reason, Croatians invite speakers to spas. This is awesome. The rest of Europe should learn from that. I can tell you. And I was in Sarajevo 2 weeks ago. The first Agile Bosnian conference was also great. Yay! Yay! Oh. Any Bosnians here around the room? Oh, yay! Awesome. Good. So maybe I should buy myself a house here in this region, because I'm now more often here than in the Netherlands and in Belgium. My name is Jurgen Appelo. I call myself a writer and a speaker because I'm not a consultant, I'm not a coach. I always say I have too many problems of my own to have time for helping others with their problems. And I find my problems more interesting than your problems. And writers and speakers are allowed to be egocentrical and only think about themselves, because that's part of the job description, right? And coaches and consultants are not. So I'm a writer and a speaker, and I wrote these two books, Management 3.0 and How to Change the World, and I'm going to tell you a bit about what the third book will be about. But first, let me tell you about Melly. This is Melly. Pretend that Melly is your colleague, that she is smiling over her shoulder when you pass by, and you think Melly is doing a good job. Melly likes her job and always smiling when I pass by, so it seems like she's enjoying it here. Well, actually not. Melly Sham hates her job. She thinks it's awful. And this is a picture that is in my hometown in Rotterdam. I'm from the Netherlands, by the way. My hometown Rotterdam is 4 meters wide. It's a huge billboard that just says that Melly Sham hates her job. And has been there for 25 years. And for 25 years I've been wondering why. What's wrong with her job? Why doesn't she quit, for God's sake? Go somewhere else. What is more fun? But no, she just sits there smiling, hating her job. I have a few friends like that. 2 friends, coincidentally both of them work for the government. And they tell me, they complain all the time, oh, Jurgen, my job is so bad, I hate my job, and tell them, why don't you quit? No, I cannot quit. I have a mortgage to pay for, and I have children, and all kinds of excuses, of course. And I understand that. I understand it's difficult to either quit your job or go improve the organization. But I think we should help people improve the organization, or else go somewhere else. Because Melly is not the only one. Many people don't like their jobs. According to some research, half of the American workers effectively hate their jobs. There's new research out by Gallup that says in the whole world only 17% of the people are engaged, feel engaged in their work. So those are bad numbers. We can do something about that. One of the attempts is called Scrum. Has anyone ever heard of the word Scrum here in this audience? Yeah, that's what I thought. All right, good. Good for you. So, I'm not complaining about Scrum. Scrum has some very good ideas, some very good suggestions. I always say that the core idea of Scrum is this big circle in the middle, this feedback cycle. I think this is a very good idea. I tried to be a writer twice. In the past, once in 2000, once in 2005, and I completely failed. I tried to write big books, and I had huge outlines of what I wanted to write about, and I had almost Gantt charts on the wall of my own project, and it didn't really work. It didn't really work. I failed. And the third time I thought maybe I should be a bit more agile about writing. Write small pieces of text and get a feedback cycle going. And we call that a blog. Well, at least that's one way of doing that. So I started writing, and I got feedback on my writing, and then people said, oh, some of the articles are interesting, some are not. And it turned out that most people wanted me to write about management in an agile context, because that's what people were struggling with. And I happened to be a manager because I was managing for 15 years at a company in Rotterdam. We made websites. Anyone heard of the name Heineken? Maybe? We made all their websites. So that's what we did. And I introduced Scrum. It was great. People loved their jobs, and management liked it, and customers liked it. And I had to figure out what is the role of the CIO here, because I was Chief Information Officer. I checked the Scrum documents, flipping back and forth, and nowhere was there a description of the CIO. My God, what do I have to do here? Well, I thought I did a good job, actually, helping the teams be more agile. So that's what I was writing about with my blog, and then the people said, this is the most interesting stuff. You should write more about that. And then I understood, oh, my audience wants me to write about management in agile organizations. Okay, I'll do that. I can do that. So the book is what my readers wanted me to write. That is a feedback cycle. I wanted to write a book about complexity science and software engineering. Boring. Right? My reader said, write about management. Anyone heard of beyond budgeting? One hand over here. Anyone else? A couple of hands. Good. Good. 4 or 5 hands. All right. So I say sometimes this is agile thinking in the finance department. In some companies, particularly in the north, the Nordic countries, they figured out that it doesn't make sense to make annual budgets in the company. Like this amount of money we will be making next year with our gadgets, or this amount of money we should be spending with that department. Why? Because the world is changing too fast. Why do you do that? Why waste your time on all those estimates? The beyond budgeting movement says get rid of all those budgets. The world is changing too fast. Change it into something else. Because some people say, but we have to keep the expenses down. That's one reason why we have budgets, so we can tell people you can spend up to this amount in that department. And then the beyond budgeting people say, replace it with transparency. Just make it transparent what everyone is spending. So for example, if you want to fly business class to a conference in New York, all right, go ahead. But everyone else will see it, that you spent that money. If you want a new computer, all right, go ahead. But everyone else will know how much it cost. And then it turns out at Statoil, big Norwegian company, Handelsbanken in Sweden and Denmark and several others, expenses actually went down. Because everyone was looking at each other, they were checking each other. This is peer pressure. The social control took over from budgets. And then you're much more flexible. Interestingly enough, when I told this last year in Italy, my friend in Italy started laughing. I'm not making this up, this is real. My Italian friends started laughing. They said, Jurgen, this is not going to work here in Italy. Because they said to me, Italians feel proud when they spend the most money. It makes the expenses go up instead of down. Right. Now, you Croatians are closer to Italy than I am here in Belgium and the Netherlands. So I don't know exactly what will happen here. But anyways, the message is there are alternatives to budgets to make yourself more agile, more flexible. Another idea that has emerged in the last couple of years is called the lean startup. Anyone read the book? All right, more hands than with beyond budgeting. I saw about 20 hands go up. All right, not as popular as Scrum still, of course. I think the lean startup movement added some good ideas to what Scrum already offered. If you look at the Scrum document, page 1 basically says, and then there was light and there was a customer. Starting to give you user stories. Well, where did that customer come from? It doesn't say so on page 0, right? The customer is just magically appears out of thin air. Well, with the Lean Startup movement, they actually pay attention to how did you get those customers. Again, there is a feedback cycle there. Run experiments, see what works, what doesn't, and then figure out where your audience, where your customers are. I always give the example of a bookkeeping program that I wrote 20 years ago. It is a fantastic bookkeeping program. I wrote 30,000 lines of code when I was a student in 2 years, and after 20 years of using it, I found only 3 bugs. That's fucking amazing, I think, right? That's high quality software. There's only one small problem with my bookkeeping program. Nobody else in the world is using it. I was unable to sell it. The world wasn't waiting for yet another bookkeeping program. I had fun making it, of course, and I learned, but Eric Ries and the Lean Startup movement would have told me, Jurgen, you're an idiot. You wrote something that nobody wants. Right. Now the Agile Manifesto says, and this is a great line, working software over comprehensive documentation. Documents can be useful, they can be important. It is even more important that your software actually works. That's what the Agile Manifesto says. I agree with that. My bookkeeping program worked. I'd say it's even more important if there's anyone actually willing to pay money for it. That's what the Lean Startup movement adds to Agile thinking. So, another great idea. Now, all these ideas, and there are many more. There's design thinking, there's real options, there is scenario planning, there's beyond budgeting and lean manufacturing. All these I call brothers and sisters. They're brothers and sisters in a family of common sense approaches to work. And they have slight disagreements. They're a bit like an Italian family, always fighting. Right? But they share the same DNA. They share the same DNA. They have the same parents. And the parents are complexity science and systems thinking. There's actually science behind it. And it works. Look at, these are the results. I apologize for the small letters. I will read out a number, a small number out to you. The first one, it says, ability to manage changing priorities. That is reported by most people in the world in agile transformations as the main benefit. Dealing with change. That's what that feedback cycle enables you to do. But also, number 2, increased productivity, and number 7, faster time to market. Ooh, have people do more in less time. That's what managers want, don't they? Oh, Scrum is going to enable you to do more in less time. When can we install it? Awesome. That's great. But employees also like it. Number 4, improved team morale. Happier people. People actually being happier. I noticed this myself. We had turnover of about 15% in our organization a number of years ago until we installed Scrum and became more agile. And then it dropped to 0. I was very proud as a manager, as CIO, that nobody was leaving anymore. They were having fun. Agile was much more engaging the people in the workforce. So, great. Lots of benefits. There are more, but you can see things turn for the better. Unfortunately, Houston, we have a problem. Barriers to further agile adoption. Look at this. 52% of the people in the world struggle with organizational culture, sometimes referred to as bureaucracy, command and control, etc., etc. The culture of the organization doesn't fit with what Agile needs. 41% a resistance to change. David just talked about that. People don't want it. It might sound logical and common sense, but they resist. They don't want it. 35% fitting Agile and non-Agile frameworks. So the software development department perhaps is Agile, but HR is not, and marketing is not, and finance is not, etc. Management support. Sometimes managers think that Scrum is something that developers do in their caves without realizing that they have to help them and make it work, etc. Oh, and this one is about making people available with the right skills. Now, the top 5 is all management stuff. It's all management stuff. Change management, by definition, is a management topic. Hiring people with the right skills, usually managers do that. Management support, obviously, etc. The biggest problems in the world with agile transformations are all management problems. Clear. Right. So I understand that sometimes at Scrum gatherings I hear this sentiment among the Agilists, let's get rid of all the managers. Let's put them on the list of impediments. The Scrum Master will deal with them. That is the emotional response to these kinds of problems. I understand that. I also believe that is the wrong approach. Just getting rid of management is not the right solution. We need good management instead of bad management. Maybe we can do better if we really understand complexity thinking. If we understand that DNA of why Agile works, then maybe we can come up with a version of management that is like a new brother or sister in that family that all share the same DNA. I'll give you a few examples, just 3. There's a huge amount of stuff there that we can learn from science, but I'll give you just 3 examples. Steal and tweak. We sometimes think of innovation as inventing new things, but it's smarter to see it as recombining ideas that already exist. I read a fascinating article in New Scientist that described how researchers modeled self-organizing and evolving systems on computers and had them compete and collaborate with each other in a virtual ecosystem. And then started measuring how do they survive, how do they keep fit. And it turned out that they spent 95% of their time stealing each other's practices. That's what they did, those systems. That was the best return on investment. Do something that others are already doing. Maybe you have to adapt it a little bit. That's the best return on investment. I sometimes call it the Samsung approach. Very successful. Yeah. Do something that somebody else is doing and do it even better. Right? So steal and tweak. I have my own version of it. I do 2-day classes based on my first book, and I noticed after doing a couple of classes that the evaluation forms at the end of the second day are too late. I wanted feedback faster. That makes sense. So I started asking for feedback with a happiness door, as I call it. Now, what already existed before were feedback walls. Many Agile coaches asked for feedback while having people write on sticky notes and put it on a wall. Fine. What already also existed was happiness index. That signifies how happy people are on a scale of 1 to 5. So I asked people before they left the room for lunch, could you write something on a sticky note and put it on the door, some feedback, and the higher you place it, the happier you are. People loved it. Oh, this is a cool way of asking for feedback. I'm going to try that myself too. And people started applying it in classes and schools and conferences, etc. I just combined 2 ideas that already existed and turned it into something new. That is innovation as well. Stealing and tweaking. And Scrum has done the same. Because all the practices in Scrum, they're stolen from other sources. That's what you should be doing. Right? They did stand-up meetings in the Second World War already. There's nothing new about the concept of stand-up meeting. Next one, anticipate, adapt, and explore. 3 ways for systems to survive in a complex environment. Anticipating is looking ahead, trying to predict the future, and actually human beings are good at that. Daniel Dennett, the famous philosopher in the US, said that the human brain is an anticipation device. This is how we cheat nature, because we can actually predict things like where earthquakes probably will happen in the future. That's amazing that we have that capability. The problem is we got addicted to it. We try to anticipate the hell out of everything. We do too much. It's a bit like vodka. We have to cut down on the anticipation, right? And use it in small doses. A little bit of alcohol per day, that's healthy, but too much is just an addiction. So we do more of adaptation. That is what the Agile Manifesto has taught us. Respond to changes like the rest of the natural world. Adapt. But what is sometimes forgotten is a third one. There's exploration. It's not looking ahead, not predicting things, also not responding to a change. No, it's just trying something out for the sake of trying. Last year I tried a chai tea latte at Starbucks. I hated it. I threw it away. Why do they sell these things? I have no idea. It's awful. But it was an experiment. I assumed it was a safe-to-fail experiment. I wouldn't die from a chai tea latte, and I was correct. So that is a safe-to-fail experiment. It's a bit the same with scouts for an army. An army sends a scout into unknown terrain. Let's see what is there, but only 1 or 2. Right? And hopefully the scouts come back. If not, everyone else goes in the other direction. That is a safe-to-fail experiment from the perspective of the whole army, of course, not for those particular scouts. So we need to do more of exploration. And this is something that is, for example, missing in the Scrum definition. Because the Scrum guide says anticipate the next sprint. Maybe think about the sprint after that. Okay, that's okay. Adapt in demos and retrospectives. But when is there time for exploration? To run some experiment that nobody asked for, but we're going to do it anyway. Screw them. Let's see what happens. Right? We might discover a new continent, right? Or we might fail spectacularly as long as it's safe. Right? That is exploration. By the way, in extreme programming, that forgotten method that nobody's talking about anymore, there's a concept called spikes, which is exactly that. It is an experiment at the architectural level. Run an experiment with unknown technologies. Send a scout in unknown terrain. The third example I have is about feedback cycles. Scientists have discovered that over geological time, animals tend to get bigger and bigger, species tend to get bigger and bigger when environments are relatively stable. Why? Because big animals are able to fight for more food and better sex. That is useful for animals, right? That's why they tended to get bigger and bigger and bigger to be able to beat the competition. But there's a downside to that. Being bigger means you're slower to respond to change. So when the environments, like the introductions of ice ages, etc., meant instability, then species got smaller. Because there's an evolutionary advantage to being small. You can respond faster to changes. Now you see exactly the same thing in the economy. Things were relatively stable and growing after the world wars. And there was an evolutionary advantage to being a huge company, because you could beat the competition by being big. Nowadays, I don't know. Things are very unstable. Look at how fast technologies have changed the way we communicate. There's an advantage to being small, or to being many small things, scaling out as a network instead of scaling up as a hierarchy. That basically you have the benefit of both then. So shortening the feedback cycles, faster responding to change. That's what Agile has done for us. And funnily enough, Scrum itself has also become faster over the years. Because maybe some of you remember that Scrum was defined as 4-week sprints in the original documentation 10, 15 years ago. 4-week sprints. Nowadays, if we see that people are doing 4-week sprints, we say, oh, how quaint. You're still on 4-week sprints. We call that vintage Scrum. Most of us, of course, do weekly iterations, or maybe even faster nowadays. Continuous deployment, that's as far as we have accelerated things by now. So, these are examples. Examples of systems thinking, example of complexity science. There's a huge amount more. But it explains why we do things in an agile way. Why all that stuff beyond budgeting and agile and lean manufacturing and design thinking, why that works. Now we need a new family member dealing with management. Because management is the biggest problem. Peter Drucker said management is about human beings. Hey, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. He said the same thing 30 years ago. It's about humans. Make those people capable of performance, and management is the critical determining factor. Look at that. Management is the critical determining factor. We've been trying to do Agile for about 12, 13 years as the way it is called Agile. And then after so many years, we've come to the conclusion that the biggest problems in the world are all management problems. Well, if Peter Drucker would have been alive, he would have said, duh. I told you so 30 years ago. Why don't you read my book, for God's sake? Right? He said it here. You cannot ignore the management stuff. Whatever you change in the organization will be local optimization until you involve management. Because the management is the glue with everything, between everything that happens. Now note that he did not say managers are critical. That is something else. Right? He said the work of management is critical. I compare it with testing. Is testing important in your organization? Of course, obviously. You need to do testing. Is it crucial to have full-time testers? Well, that depends. Depends on the kind of organization, the work, whether people want to specialize in it. That's okay, full-time testers, as long as they work on cross-functional teams, etc., etc. But the work of testing could be done by anyone. A small startup of 4 founders probably does not have a full-time tester. They do this together, right? So same with management. Management is crucial. Do we need full-time managers? Well, that depends on the size of your organization, right? But everyone is responsible for management. As I always say, I compare it with testing, and if your product is bad, do you blame just the testers for crappy software? Sure, I hear somebody say sure, yeah, that's what I sometimes hear, yeah. No, you should be blaming everyone. Everyone involved is responsible in part for that crappy product, right? Same with management. If the organization sucks, if everyone hates their jobs, do you blame just the managers? Yes, I always see people nodding their heads. Yes, that's what we do. Okay, and I say, no, you're wrong. Because everyone contributes to the organization. We're all responsible for the act of management. Yes, managers do maybe more of it than others. So management is too important to be left to the managers. Right? We are all involved. So the core idea of what I am doing is trying to help people introduce management practices without caring whether they are managers or not. That is a detail for me. Whether you have the job description that says, I am a full-time manager, well, woohoo, good for you. Right? But a lot of people are responsible for management activities because they are crucial. You cannot ignore it. You cannot just optimize software development and then after 12 years say, we have management problems. Then you're doing it wrong. Okay, so let's look at a few examples. This is a practice that I stole from, stolen and tweaked from a company in Poland, Lunar Logic, headed by Paul Klipp, who now has another job. He was a CEO, and actually I found the same practice later at other companies. They had a kudo box, as they called it. They had tokens of appreciation to give to other people in the organization for doing a good job. The idea is you write something on it, a nice compliment, thank you for helping me out, or something like that, and you give it. Or in this case, they put it in a box, and Paul, the CEO, looked in the box once per week or something, and went to that person who received the compliment, and that person got a little present. Isn't that nice? A box of chocolates, flowers, dinner for 2, movie ticket, whatever. The person could choose. Now, it was awesome to get a present with a compliment from somebody else. Systems thinkers say this makes total sense because you often get more of what you focus on. If you focus on bad behaviors in the organization, always punishing people for making mistakes, etc., people will get demotivated. They will make more mistakes. It was a vicious cycle that just goes downwards. You want one that goes up. Right? So if you focus on the good things and compliment people, people will be doing more good things. You get more of what you focus on. Makes sense? Again, this is systems thinking applied. And Paul said on the corporate budget, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a few presents. It's peanuts. But the effect it has on the organizational culture was astounding. And that was the #1 problem that we are aiming for, solving. So, kudo cards. Another example, delegation boards. This is a practice that I created myself by stealing from various sources, including servant leadership. I came up with this visualization of delegation. Because for good reasons, David just said the previous hour that you need to visualize your workflow. If you have a problem optimizing your workflow, well, it helps significantly if you visualize it. They do the same, by the way, with business models. If you have difficulty defining your business model, why don't you visualize it with a canvas? They call it the business model canvas. Therefore, if you have difficulty delegating and having people self-organize, why don't you visualize it with an information radiator and see what is going on? Well, Here are 7 levels of delegation, and this board says that selecting team members is at level 3, for example. That means, level 3 means I as a manager decide, because it's on this side, I decide, but level 3 means I will ask you first. This is what I actually did a couple of years ago. With new job candidates, I had the teams do the first job interviews with new candidates. And then team members told me which people they liked, which ones they didn't like, and I had the final interview. I didn't want to hire anyone that was not liked by team members. Why would I? That made no sense. It saved me time. Right? So that was level 3. And by visualizing it, you make it perfectly clear how much people can self-organize. One favorite quote, I skipped that one, is that the word management is from the Italian word maneggiare, taking care of horses. That's great. Managing is taking care of a horse. That's a great metaphor. Right? Every organization is like a horse. Now, some organizations are like race horses. They need to win the races. Some are like sturdy horses, big, and they pull carts full of vegetables or fat tourists or something like that. Maybe some organizations are like My Little Pony. That could also be. But we can compare them in a metaphorical way with horses. And full self-organization, pure self-organization would be like a wild horse. Sometimes people say, let's get rid of all the managers. Right? We are a self-organizing team. We are self-managers. Well, that would be like a wild horse. Nothing wrong with wild horses, but I am not going to sit on a wild horse, slap its ass, say yeehaw, and then hope and pray that it runs in the right direction. That's bad management. So I need the reins, I need the spurs, I need a fence around the horse, and we need a loving, respectful relationship. I need to nurture the horse and feed it, take care of it, and hopefully it doesn't kick me in the face. Right? And practically speaking, the horse decides where it wants to go, but I can influence it a little bit. Right? So I like that metaphor, and this is basically how you show where the fence is to the horse. And in this case, the horse can actually talk. Because the horse can discuss with you as a team, can we move this sticky note to level 5? That means we decide as the team, but you can give us input on your preferences. But we are allowed to ignore your input. That would be level 5. So you can discuss where the fence is around self-organization. Can really help some people. Exploration days. Has anyone heard of FedEx days? Okay, about 10 hands going up. It was a term that Atlassian, the tool vendor, came up a couple of years ago. They organize one day every 3 months where everyone stops doing their regular work and starts running an experiment. Important. Exploration. Right? Run an experiment, do something cool, and then the obligation is show the results within 24 hours to your colleagues. That's why they call it FedEx days. Show the results within 24 hours. Deliver something that which people say, wow, that is amazing. Right? Just an experiment or a demo, not a full product, of course. Now, this worked so well, people were so enthusiastic about it, and it solves that issue of exploration, that it was copied by many other people in the world. Steele and Tweak, also awesome. Daniel Pink, in his famous book Drive, wrote about it as well. Until the FedEx company started complaining. They probably got phone calls from people. Yeah, this is Casimir from Croatia. Can you explain to me how the FedEx day works exactly? What? We're the company FedEx. We know nothing about FedEx days. So the company, FedEx, asked Atlassian to change their name, and now Atlassian calls it Ship It Days. And I think that's such a pity, because with that name, you focus on shipping things, but that was not the point. The point was exploring, sending scouts in unknown terrains, do something weird and see what we can come up with. So I prefer the term exploration days. It's the same practice, just rebranded. Some people prefer innovation days. At Spotify, they call them hack days. At Facebook, they call them hackathons. It's all the same thing, right? With small variations. Although with hackathons and hack days, The HR people start wondering, how can we join? We don't know how to hack. And the marketers, etc. as well. So exploration and innovation days are a bit more inclusive, because there's a lot of innovation that you could attempt in the HR department as well. Here's one of my favorite pictures. This one is taken at Cisco Systems Norway. Olve was one of the software guys who showed me around, and they showed me their football table, or as some people say, football table. I have no idea why, because there's a T in foot, therefore it should be football table as far as I'm concerned. So this is the football table at Cisco Systems, and they make these audio-visual equipments for the biggest company in the world to have teleconferencing meetings, etc. So very technical guys. Now what he said was, what Olve said was, we have upgraded our football table a little bit. That is in their lunch area. So for example, what they did was they installed a laser beam in the goal. I'm showing you the laser beam with my laser beam. So this is sort of a recursive laser beam you're looking at now. A fractal laser beam. So they have a laser beam, and there's also, they cut this out themselves, there's a counter here. So the football table keeps track of the scores. What they also did was, you can barely see it, but here's a security card reader. The same one that is also on the doors of their buildings. So the table knows who is playing because the guys swipe their security card before they start playing. And then there's software running that keeps track of the games. There's the laser, I was told, can also measure the speed of the ball and things like that. It's awesome. And one more thing, Olve said, the next thing they are planning, I don't know if they did that already, there was already a television screen there. He said, we want to install a little camera here so that we can replay the best goals in slow motion. Fantastic! This is a team having fun, right? If you would measure engagement, it would be 100% maybe at this company. Now, Olve told me something important. He said, at some companies, they try to have people innovate and come up with creative ideas by making a corner with a lounge area with comfortable sofas and colorful wallpaper and cushions, and where people can relax and have an innovative idea. Well, nothing comes to mind right now. So he said that doesn't work. That doesn't work. What you need to do is you have to incentivize innovation there where people are playing, where they're already having fun. And this is where these guys are having fun. And I'm quite sure by now Google Glass is already integrated with that table, and they have drones flying over it with live streaming to YouTube of the match that's going on, or something like that. That is how they are. That's how they run experiments. A couple of more examples. Business guilds. I was at Spotify, the famous company in Sweden, where they have different names for everything. They're a bit weird. Instead of teams, they have squads. Instead of departments, they have tribes. And what I found most interesting is, instead of communities of practice, they have guilds. I like that one very much. Because a community of practice is a self-organized community across teams focusing on a certain topic, like testing or iOS development or whatever, right? So people can share best practices and teach each other. Fine, but the term community of practice, it's so boring. Right? A guild is a much more interesting name, and they call them guilds at Spotify. And the word guild has this associationship with craftsmanship. We had guilds of everything, for everything in Europe. Guilds for carpenters, guilds for masonry. There are still guilds. In Hollywood, there's an actors guild, for example. They have masters teaching the apprentices, etc. So a very interesting word. And words matter. For example, I don't know if there are any game players here in the room, but in online game worlds such as World of Warcraft and League of Legends, they don't call them the community of practice for warriors. That doesn't sound like something that I would want to be a part of. No, it's the Warriors Guild, of course. Or even worse, the Center of Excellence for Wizards. What? No, it's the Wizards Guild and the Thieves Guild. That's what people rally around. That's what they want to be a part of. I am a center of excellence, right? I don't want to be part of a center of excellence. So guilds can be are the same as community of practice, but words can matter. Moving motivators. David just gave you an example of people resisting change. I also have my own example. I introduced Scrum, and one person was very much against it. One of the software developers, he hated it. And when I asked why, it said it was about the collective code ownership part. Well, actually that is extreme programming, but we introduced it as part of Scrum. The code is now the team's ownership, not just yours. He didn't like that. It was his code that he wrote, and only he was able to touch it. That was his opinion. And I said, no, I want you to share the code with the others. But he said, I'm one of the best software developers here in this team. And that was true. He was one of the best software developers. And he didn't want the monkeys on his team to touch his code. And I understood that. I understood his problem. I could only imagine if he had created the most beautiful classes and interfaces in the morning and then went off for lunch and then came back and they saw that the baboons had destroyed everything. Oh my God, I can start all over again. So this was important for him. As David said, we were threatening his sense of identity, the classes that he made that were part of him. Now, but I still needed him to share his code. No discussion about it. But I understood I have to give something else in return to restore his sense of identity. So what I did was I offered him the position of a leader of a community of practice. I shouldn't be doing that because they should be self-organizing, but this was my solution and it worked out very well. Because when he was the leader of community of practice, he got a few hours per week to teach others, to help others, and to get teams to talk about code quality. And he did a good job, actually, talking about coding guidelines, and they did code reviews and whatever. And people were very appreciative of what he did. And then he was okay with it. He was prepared to give up his private code ownership because he got something else in return that restored his sense of identity, his need for status, his need for mastery, feeling that he was one of the best. That was important for him. So every time you introduce a change, you probably are attacking something that is valuable to people, that's important for them. And the Agile Manifesto says individuals and interactions over processes and teams. And we need to figure out what is important for those individuals in order to get them to accept, to adopt those practices. And maybe we have to do some sneaky things in order to move things forward. Because after a couple of months, he was the most vocal evangelist in favor of Scrum. He actually liked it. He just had to get past that hurdle of him feeling attacked. I have this little game called Moving Motivators where you can figure out what is important for people. That's something that many coaches seem to appreciate very much. What are they? What is the resistance? All right, merit money. Oh, this is one of my favorites. This is about because it's about money. As one of my favorite topics. So there's this terrible practice where managers give bonuses to people, and that basically was the cause of the big credit crisis that we have been through over the last couple of years. We need something different, right? But still, many CEOs, and I talked with one yesterday or 2 days ago in Minsk, they still have this need sometimes to make part of the profits available to employees because they did a great job. They deserve to enjoy part of the money that we generated together with each other, with more than just a fixed salary. The problem is, how do you do that in a way that is fair, that doesn't destroy motivation or destroy the economy? Well, some companies came up with a very interesting approach. Basically, they split the money equally among everyone, so everyone gets their own share of the bonus money on one condition. You cannot keep it for yourself. You have to give it to others, but in any way that you like. So, for example, I get my little portion of the bonus money, and I decide to give half of it to you, because you helped me out when I was feeling depressed last month, because he had killed my Tamagotchi. And I almost quit my job over that, but you pulled me through. Thank you for that. Thank you. So I give you half of the bonus money, of my bonus money, and I split the rest equally among the other team members, except him, of course. I can do that, because this is my bonus money. But of course, he will have his own response to that. And she will have her own response. And it becomes a game. It becomes an ecosystem. And things will self-organize. And if you do this in short iterations, you can keep it safe to fail. This is exactly what I'm doing with my management team at Happy Melly. We have a merit money system. We have points, we call them hugs, actually, instead of money. We give each other hugs, 100 hugs per month. And every month is different. And we can respond, and that is fine. And ultimately, the hugs can translate or can be exchanged for cash, right, to real bonus. Now, the great thing about this practice, and they do this at Linden Labs, the creators of Second Life, IGN, part of Games, part of News Corporation. The great thing is that management just says, we decide what the amount of money is, but we leave it to you guys to decide how much everyone gets. Have fun. And that works much better. It's much safer that way. It's still scary. It is still scary, I admit. Some people were against it when we started, but then they loved it after a couple of months because it made them co-responsible for this. This is something that we need to do. Decide how much money everyone gets. We cannot just shove that problem away. Right? It's still something that needs to be solved. So let's share the responsibility and do it in small steps to keep it safe and adapt. All right. I'm going to skip this one. Last example. This is a happiness index, a photo that I took at a company in Rotterdam. I love it. The management here made a big black wall available. And then with crayon markers, people plot their happiness index over time. So at one point, for example, this person was very unhappy. Seems to be correlated with this person who was very happy at the same at the same time. Totally off the scale. I have no idea what went on here. But anyways, it's an information radiator. You can start investigating. And the problem, the issue here is, of course, not that I suggest that you plot happiness index. I suggest that you make a big black wall available for people to experiment with. That was the point. That was what they did. And after a while, it wasn't working for them anymore. All right, try something else. But they were very engaged, those people. Right. Now, all these practices, all these ideas, they're all things that are happening elsewhere in the world. And this is all about management stuff. Right? It's all the way we manage things together as an organization. And you can download these articles here from this URL, bit.ly/m30workout, because basically this is the new book that I'm writing, and in 2 months it's finished. There's still a week or two where you can send me your stories, your own input. And if I use your story in my book, I can make you famous. Maybe. All right. So feel free to download the articles in their current form. I am now updating them and editing them to remove all the stupid English mistakes I introduced. And together we can make Melly happy. Thank you very much for listening. That's part of the job description, right? And coaches and consultants are not. So I'm a writer and a speaker, and I wrote these 2 books, Management 3.0 and How to Change the World, and I'm going to tell you a bit about what the 3rd book will be about. But first, let me tell you about Melly. This is Melly. Pretend that Melly is your colleague, that she is smiling over her shoulder when you pass by, and you think Melly is doing a good job. Melly likes her job and always smiling when I pass by, so seems like she's enjoying it here. Well, actually not. Melly Sham hates her job. She thinks it's awful. And this is a picture that is in my hometown in Rotterdam. I'm from the Netherlands, by the way. My hometown Rotterdam is 4 meters wide. It's a huge billboard that just says that Melly hates her job, and has been there for 25 years. And for 25 years I've been wondering why. What's wrong with her job? Why doesn't she quit, for God's sake? Go somewhere else. What is more fun? But no, she just sits there smiling, hating her job. I have a few friends like that. 2 friends, coincidentally, both of them work for the government. And they tell me, they complain all the time, Jurgen, my job is so bad, I hate my job, and tell them, why don't you quit? No, I cannot quit. I have a mortgage to pay for, and I have children, and all kinds of excuses, of course. And I understand that. I understand it's difficult to either quit your job or go improve the organization. But I think we should help people. Help people improve the organization, or else go somewhere else. Because Melly is not the only one. Many people don't like their jobs. According to some research, half of the American workers effectively hate their jobs. There's new research out by Gallup that says in the whole world only 17% of the people are engaged, feel engaged in their work. So those are bad numbers. We can do something about that. One of the attempts is called Scrum. Has anyone ever heard of the word Scrum here in this audience? Yeah, that's what I thought. All right, good. Good for you. So, I'm not complaining about Scrum. Scrum has some very good ideas, some very good suggestions. I always say that the core idea of Scrum is this big circle in the middle, this feedback cycle. I think this is a very good idea. I tried to be a writer twice in the past, once in 2000, once in 2005, and I completely failed. I tried to write big books, and I had So thank you very much for inviting me here at the Agile Adria conference. This is my 3rd visit to Croatia. Awesome. The first one was in Zadar, or Zadar. How do I pronounce it correctly? Zadar. Okay. So at the Cross conference, also at a luxurious spa. For some reason, Croatians invite speakers to spas. This is awesome. The rest of Europe should learn from that. I can tell you. And I was in Sarajevo 2 weeks ago. The first Agile Bosnian conference was also great. Yay! Yay! Ooh, oh. Any Bosnians here around the room? Oh, yay! Awesome. Good. So I should buy myself a house here in this region, because I'm now more often here than in the Netherlands and in Belgium. My name is Jurgen Appelo. I call myself a writer and a speaker because I'm not a consultant, I'm not a coach. I always say I have too many problems of my own to have time for helping others with their problems. And I find my problems more interesting than your problems. And writers and speakers are allowed to be egocentrical and only think about themselves. With huge outlines of what I wanted to write about, and I had almost Gantt charts on the wall of my own project, and it didn't really work. It didn't really work. I failed. And the 3rd time I thought maybe I should be a bit more agile about writing. Write small pieces of text and get a feedback cycle going. And we call that a blog. Well, at least that's one way of doing that. So I started writing, and I got feedback on my writing, and then people said, oh, some of the articles are interesting, some are not. And it turned out that most people wanted me to write about management in an agile context, because that's what people were struggling with. And I happened to be a manager because I was managing for 15 years at a company in Rotterdam. We made websites. Anyone heard of the name Heineken? We made all their websites. So that's what we did, and I introduced Scrum. It was great. People loved their jobs, and management liked it, and customers liked it. And I had to figure out what is the role of the CIO here, because I was Chief Information Officer. I checked the Scrum documents, flipping back and forth, and nowhere was there a description of the CIO. My God, what do I have to do here? Well, I thought I did a good job, actually, helping the teams be more agile. So that's what I was writing about with my blog, and then the people said, this is the most interesting stuff. You should write more about that. And then I understood, oh, my audience wants me to write about management in agile organizations. Okay, I'll do that. I can do that. So the book is what my readers wanted me to write. That is a feedback cycle. I wanted to write a book about complexity science and software engineering. Boring. Right? My reader said, write about management. Anyone heard of Beyond Budgeting? One hand over here. Anyone else? A couple of hands. Good. Good. 4 or 5 hands. All right. So I say sometimes this is agile thinking in the finance department. In some companies, particularly in the north, the Nordic countries, they figured out that it does make sense to make annual budgets in the company. Like this amount of money we will be making next year with our gadgets, or this amount of money we should be spending with that department. Why? Because the world is changing too fast. Why do you do that? Why waste your time on all those estimates? The Beyond Budgeting movement says get rid of all those budgets. The world is changing too fast. Change it into something else. Because some people say, but we have to keep the expenses down. That's one reason why we have budgets, so we can tell people you can spend up to this amount in that department. And then the Beyond Budgeting people say, replace it with transparency.